fourth speaker, who is Agnieszka Romanowska from Kraków, from the Jagiellonian University, and she will speak about what happened after the Tempest.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, because of the topic of my seminar, which was death and dying, and we tried to look at death as a cultural concept, both in Shakespeare's days and today, I've decided that I would like to tell you a few words about a performance that had its premiere last year in one of the Polish theatres, a performance that is based on a scenario that undertakes and develops some of the topic of death, some of the motives of death as it is present in Shakespeare's The Tempest. I should start with a few words about the director, I think, and I'm very thankful to Agata Duda Gracz. She has this wonderful T-shirt, especially for my seminar. People, she wears it on many pictures that we have in the net. What is important? She is nowadays one of the most interesting Polish directors. And she is author of what critics call Shakespearean apocrypha. So these are basically her own scenarios of canonical plays, rewritten, reinterpreted, presenting her own very often highly eccentric interpretations. And she is author of three, as you can see. Burzy, that is the one based on The Tempest, being my focus today. What we should know before I'll tell you a few words and I'll show you some slides, pictures from the performance, is that Duda Gracz is both director and stage designer, and it's very important because a very clearly authorial scenography is the key to her performances. It is the visual metaphor, really, in her performances that is the main generator of actors' emotions, and that's the main vehicle for meaning. And the visual in her work is as important as the text. Sometimes, in some cases, even more important than the text, which is not coincidental. This is a director who is educated both in drama studies, but she also graduated from History of Art department. And last but not least, but I have to mention it, although this is biography, but she is daughter of a very well-known painter. So she comes from a background where the visual arts were always in the foreground, and this has immense impact on what she does in the theatre. Now, if I had to summarize this complex performance in one sentence, and I feel I should do it for you now, I'd say, as banal as this may sound, I'd say that it's about unhappy life, caused by poisonous family relations that result in hatred and in desire for revenge. But Burzy touches a number of topics from aging, frustration, disillusionment, to loneliness, home violence, enmity towards the other is also there. And finally, destruction, including self-destruction. So it's really a complex thing. And as a starting point for this very short case study that I'm going to share with you, I take the words from the theatre's website when they advertise the performance as a morality about death of humanity in a human being. So it's a slightly different version you have here on the slide. A few words very quickly about the title, because I have to comment on it. Burzy Szekspira. This is a title in itself is ambiguous because it may mean after the play, The Tempest, that is after the Tempest there is no more playwriting, as we believe, there is no more magic. It may mean after the Tempest, in terms of the plot, when the plot of the Tempest is over, or the plot finishes with Prospero coming back home, but we are doubtful whether the future is going to be happy for him and Miranda. But the title at the same time means after the Tempest, that is after the storm, after the situation of revenge, potential revenge that the magician creates to punish his wrongdoers. And I have to say that the answer for what follows after the Tempest, or what comes after the Tempest, so the question from the initial slide, is in this performance very pessimistic. That is, after the Tempest comes death. And so it is clear that the Tempest is not a purifying experience in this case for anyone. And death being how this is achieved. Now, death is the key element, I'd argue, the key element of this story as Duda Gracz sees it and interprets it. And death images are the key elements of the stage design. And this is achieved because, and this is how she does it, she amplifies, as I see it, the motives of death that can be found, that can be read in Shakespeare's The Tempest. She amplifies them so that actually in Duda Grac's text, but most importantly in her stage design, stage scenery and costume, there is actually more death than in Shakespeare. And I suggest that I'll tell you a few words showing the slides about particular characters. That will be the easiest way to show how the director brands each of the characters with their own death marks. So I have to start with Prospero, unwashed, unkempt, frustrated, bored, arrogant, in his dirty pajamas, sitting on this shabby sofa, looking at the screen of a broken TV. He is an epitome of fallen failure. Once a powerful master, an overwhelming husband, a tyrannical father, he's become reduced to this, like, helplessly imagining that he may revenge on all the people that he believes have wronged him. Now, the plot is actually a projection of his memories / imagination, because this is not clear, not 100% clear, in which he recreates all the other characters. So the other characters are actually ghosts of the past that he recreates, or, as the characters say themselves, they complain that he does not allow them to stop being. So they are caught in this kind of death in life or life in death state. Okay, the next character, sorry, this is something I might have time to comment or not. Ariel. I'd say Ariel is the most pointedly death-infected character in this performance, or death-marked character. And this is suggested by a number of features. First of all, her, because it's a she figure, her naked, thin, ash-painted body and black eyes suggest that she died in flames. And as we learn, as the story reveals, that she's actually one of the victims of a fire that broke out in Prospero's house because his alcoholic wife left a burning cigarette in her bed. Yes. This Ariel is also mutilated, as you can see on the slide. There are those fresh or never healing wounds on her back where she used to have wings. Another mark of death in Ariel is the movement. She moves, that they are mechanical, automatic movements, so that while fulfilling Prospero's orders, she resembles a kind of humanoid robot, really. And so this is both a mark of the dehumanized state, but also a kind of making her not a living creature, but also by an automaton. And finally, her freedom, or this final freedom, is also death marked, because Ariel actually gets crushed by the news that she has never had, that there has never been anything magical about her which she believed, and by the news that she is simply an ugly, naked body. So there is no freedom, there is absolutely an absolute destruction for this character. Now Ariel is also a kind of alter ego of Miranda, and the two are linked by at least two aspects. Now we have Miranda on the slide. One is that both died in the same fire that consumed Prospero's house. Miranda died as a baby. This is what we learn. So Miranda is actually a victim of her alcohol-addicted mother's negligence. The other feature linking Miranda with Ariel is that Miranda is a product of her father's education, or you might perhaps rather call it ruthless schooling of sorts. She is able to give erudite speeches on all subjects possible, ranging from politics to feminism. And she does this to a great satisfaction of her father, who simply trained her to have a discussion partner. In Prospero's imagination, she comes back as a schoolgirl / young woman. As you can see, the costume suggests. And it's clear that her father was a tyrannical father, and that she actually had never had any relationship with her mother. So this is the case of Miranda. Now, speaking about her mother, now we have Miranda's mother, the wife of Prospero, invented by Agata Duda Gracz, but notably her name is Stefania, so going to Stefano. Alcohol and nicotine addict, on stage, as this slide shows you, all the time in her sort of pinkish bath suit on pajamas, always with a cigarette in her mouth, red face, swollen, her eyes full of fear and desperation. She is victim of her authoritarian husband. We are given to understand that her addiction is caused by her depression, that is caused by this marriage, unhealthy relationship. She's also a victim of grief, because she's totally broken by the death of her baby. So once an attractive woman, in the performance, she's showed as a shaking drunkard, basically. Caliban, or actually in this case, the Calibans, because they are played by a pair of actors. Actually, they are called by Prospero. Prospero calls them or introduces them as his poor neighbours. He, as a kind of colorful clothes, hippie-like, kind freebooter with no regular job. Once, as we learned, he was employed in Prospero's house to do small reparations. As the past mingles with the present, actually, it's just the past recreated, we also see him as the raper of Miranda. So there is this act of raping Miranda repeatedly shown, as the performance has certain repeated sequences. While the she-Caliban is and presented as this kind of overworked wife, housewife, shabby housecoat, on stage always carrying shopping bags filled with all kinds of vegetables, canned food, talking about what to cook to her husband to satisfy him, and actually she's always hoping that he one day brings home this promised refrigerator so that she can stop storing food on the windowsill. I'm sort of partly paraphrasing the script more or less for you. And then last but not least, she is black, which provokes a number of racist comments on the part of Prospero and also on the part of the Caliban. What is important about the Calibans is that at a certain moment of the play, they become the Macbeths. And they are called the Macbeths, so they are actually introduced. They introduce themselves as Macbeth and the she-Macbeth. It's not Lady Macbeth, but the she-Macbeth. They kill Prospero. So in that act, which is also repeatedly shown to us as the performance progresses, on the one hand, Prospero's fear of those poor neighbors lurking through his window was realized, and they got the social promotion that was apparently one of their aims. Once they have taken the place of this wealthy, influential neighbor master. Ferdinand and the shipwrecks. Now, their stay on the island is a symbol of social isolation. They cannot communicate, although forced to be there together by the shipwreck. On the island, and this is important, they are tormented by recurrent memories of their long and painful deaths by drowning. That's important. And in the slide, we have the scene after the storm with the bodies and the luggage scattered along the coast. So, in this variation on Shakespeare's The Tempest, all characters are infected with death in various ways. So what we have is that the potential death of Prospero, Miranda is changed into their actual deaths. Prospero dies, killed by the Calibans. If Alonso and Ferdinand are allowed to live, it is only in order to punish them with a punishment more cruel than drowning, because they actually are forced, as all the other characters, which we have on this slide, everybody is actually forced to share Prospero's state of this life in death, death in life, vegetation of sorts. And now, I would say, and sort of submitting this for discussion, I'd say that although this performance is mostly on the individual traumas, yes, disintegrated family life, personal failures, it also, or some elements of the plot, but especially some elements of the plot visualized in stage design metaphors, activate also our collective traumas. Two, I think, of such elements stand in the foreground in this play: death in fire and death in water, death in shipwreck. I think that at least since 9/11, and with the continuous news of capsized refugee boats, our collective sensitivity towards these two types of death is heightened, and an intelligent director is able to make it a very powerful tool in theatre, especially in this kind of theatre that depends on the visual. That we have here, I've collected like 3 slides in which we can perhaps see this fire, death death in water situations. Just to conclude, I say that this case, this performance, is a very good illustration that Shakespeare today is a very good and very flexible tool to deal with our today's fears, to enact them on stage, try to understand them, both in individual but also collective traumas, including the fear of death. Violent death, including. Yeah, thank you very much.